Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Geig, and welcome to another episode of Unity Behind the Game. Today, we are back with Hardspace Shipbreaker by Blackbird Interactive, and today I'm talking with Chris Williams and Elliot Hudson. How you doing, guys?
Great,
Good,
thanks.
Fantastic. How's life?
Weird, but good.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Life on the other side. So last time we had you guys on, well, this is unique too. This is the first time we've ever had anyone come back. So it obviously wasn't too painful the first time. You guys wanted to be a part of it again. And last time the game was, in development, hadn't launched in early access or anything yet. And now it has. So how's everything been going?
It's been going extremely well. I think we weren't quite sure how this kind of unusual game was going to be received by audiences, but it seems to have found a really big core group of people that really dig it, and it's done better than we thought it was going to do. And the Discord, for example, has got 10,000 members in it, which is pretty wild. We didn't think it would get that big, but yeah, it's been really fun and really exciting.
Chris, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was. So yeah, we've seen a lot of on the Discord side. We've seen a lot of like fan art coming in. That's super exciting. And lots of, like,
Oh yeah,
yeah. There's a real community that I'm not used to seeing with some of the stuff that I put out. It really was encouraging to see that stuff.
Has any of the fan art kind of weirded you out?
Nothing weird.
Hasn't gotten to that point yet.
Not yet.
That's when we know we've really made it.
That's right. Give it time.
It's all just standard ship stuff, but like, yeah, it's really, really encouraging to see that kind of thing at the moment. So,
oh, fantastic. So, I was playing it again very recently to get ready for this, and man, it struck me again, just that awesome sort of space western, blue collar. Yeah, even the intro with the kid saying that little poem/prayer. It just like, this is just, the aesthetic is just so on point. So that's not a question. I just wanted to throw that out there. Just well done with that. Last time I had your team on, we were kind of talking about like your target player, right? We called your target player Jeff, and I asked the guys to describe Jeff. So how's Jeff doing these days? It sounds like Jeff's liking the game.
Yeah, I'd say Jeff's really liking the game. Finding new and creative ways to take these ships apart. And we've been updating the game relatively regularly and providing new challenges, new interesting tools, and stuff and strategies for the players to learn and develop. And they in turn have been giving us a lot of great feedback about what they want to see going forward. So we hope to start incorporating some more of that for them in the future.
Excellent. Right on. So, you had mentioned before that this was really successful, on early access, more successful than you had thought. Like, without necessarily getting into like specific numbers or anything like that, what do you define success as, for your studio? I know it's different for everybody. But when you say it's really successful in early access, what does that mean?
I think there's a couple things that mean success to us, and it's not necessarily number of sales or anything like that. It's more how engaged the community is with the game, and the fact that there is a community that's still playing regularly, and a decent amount of players that are still playing relatively regularly, and wanting to see more from us and being open and communicative with us. I think that was far more important to us, that we deliver a product that players really like, that they feel is honoring what they're looking for and what they're asking for in early access. And that is generally reviewed really well. The Steam review is sitting up at around 89-90%, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we want to be as a studio that makes really good quality products. So that for us, those were sort of the key metrics of success.
One of the things for me was one of the moments when we went live was seeing people that we know in the industry playing our game as well. We woke up one morning to see Jonathan Blow playing our game on Twitch, and that got exciting for me. And then just generally like Brennan's concept art and stuff, seeing that being passed around on Twitter amongst some of the prominent art directors in the industry. For me, that's when I start to go, okay, this thing is actually starting to pick up quite a bit of like traction.
That's to feel very validating.
Yeah, super validating. Yeah, to the point where up until this game, we were referred to as the Homeworld Studio, because that's kind of all we had done, and now we often get referred to as the Shipbreaker Studio. So that's pretty cool. Yeah,
nice. anyone throwing at it like a negative review, like why is space so dangerous? Why is it so hard?
Oh, yeah, that'll always happen.
Fair enough. No, it's it's a super hard game, but it in very fun ways. As I was noting last time we talked about it, I died a lot, but yeah. So this game here, this game, as you had said, like now you're being sort of referred to as like the Shipbreaker studio, but it started as a game jam project, right? Like, going back and talking a little bit about that process, like what sort of got you here from game jam game to the moment we were like, let's keep making this, to all the way to like now?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. So I guess a bit about 4 years ago now, we had just shipped Deserts of Karak, the Homeworld prequel game, and we hadn't quite lined up the next big project yet. And the studio, we knew we were interested in building skills with creating new IP and new products. So we actually did a little internal game jam with everybody in the studio, like literally the accountants and our team managers, and everybody was involved with this game jam, where for a week we just broke into teams of about 7 to 8 people, and we made, I think, 4 or 5 different little projects. And it was super fun, super engaging, really nice to sort of get the creative juices flowing again after filing a product. And this was one of those game jam games. It was actually a little game called Hello Collector originally, and the goal for that little game jam was to make, or at least for that one little project, was to make a game that felt like the movie Gravity. When Sandra Bullock is clambering over this debris in space, and there's more debris coming in and hitting it, and she's like spiraling and just barely able to hang on, and always feeling like there's this threat of being flung out into the void. We wanted to create that from a first person perspective, and so that's what we did. It was actually super fun, really rewarding. A very simple little setup of some debris floating in space, and you trying to get from point A to point B and not get flung off into space. And so that was it. And it was really immersive. It was really scary but fun. And I think there was enough going on there, gameplay wise and theme and sort of setting and tone, that we were like, we think this could probably stretch into something bigger.
Awesome. Where did this obsession with killing people in the void of space come from, would you say?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's probably drawn a lot from the inspirations that we typically have at the studio. 80s and 90s sci-fi films like Aliens or Blade Runner, and all these things that have this sort of existential dread to them as well as being just like cool sci-fi. So I think that's probably a big part of it.
That's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting. We talk about all the things that we put into the game, like blue collar, shipbreaking, that thing. But one thing that's actually stayed the same from the game jam is terrifying space death. It seems to be a theme that we don't really speak about. Yeah, that's weird.
That atmospheric element. You get that crack in your visor, and you're like, wait a minute now, hold up.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that mechanically was always really interesting to us, is that space is trying to kill you in so many different ways. And it adds this nice layer of almost survival mechanics to it. It was definitely key to the game jam.
Nice. So, one thing that you had talked about before is this concept of, like, say, following the breadcrumbs. And can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, when we say follow the breadcrumbs, what we're talking about is kind of a creative process that we use here at Blackbird, which is to constantly be checking in with yourself about where your project or your new idea is at, and really try to identify what's working and follow that in a direction that helps the project grow in a really organic way, versus what some places do, where they sort of try an idea. If it doesn't work, they scrap that and start at the very beginning again. We don't try to do that. We try to keep building on stuff and in a sense follow these tasty breadcrumbs until we find our destination. And so that's what we did for this project. So again, it started as this game jam game that was just about survival in a debris field. And that was it. Very simple, very basic. And when we were expanding that idea, we found that it wasn't quite working. There wasn't quite enough there to make a full project. And so we kept a lot of those core elements, the zero-G movement, the sense of dread, the sarcastic humor that you see in Shipbreaker today, keep those elements, but then look for breadcrumbs that took it into a better direction, a stronger direction. And that's where things like shipbreaking come in, so that you actually create the debris rather than debris be there ahead of time. That was super important to us. The blue collar theme wasn't there originally. That's a breadcrumb that we found that sort of solidified everything. And when we found that one, we were like, okay, this is now a full-fledged project.
One thing that, I heard you guys talking about this with the Unite talk, or the Night Now talk that you were doing. And one thing that I thought would be really kind of interesting to dig into is you say you analyze the game where it's at, and you keep the parts that are working, you take out the parts that aren't working, and evolve it as opposed to scrapping it and replacing it. How do you know when something isn't working? Like, how do you identify that in order to remove it?
Yeah, it takes discipline, and kind of like a brutal honesty, and teamwork and collaboration. Like, you basically need to be constantly getting everyone's opinions, whether it's people on the team, people higher up in the company, people external, if you've got a publisher or maybe playtesters that you want to bring in to look at stuff, and really uncritically gather everyone's feedback. And if you're doing that and you're being honest about it and being open about it, you should start to see where there are trends of what people are liking and not liking. And it's tempting to look at stuff that's not working and be like, well, maybe they're wrong. Maybe we just haven't polished it enough, or we haven't developed it enough. Maybe it'll get better. But I think, in your gut, you'll know when something's actually not working. And that's the point where you need to be willing to let that go and move on to something else.
I think we learned that a couple times in the project before that stuck. Not being pot committed to something. There's been times when we try to brute force that through, like with certain game elements, certain sizes of ships, this kind of thing. It doesn't really get you anywhere to kind of try and force things through at certain points.
Do you have an example of one?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. Like Chris mentioned size of ship, so that was one where we started to hit some really big technical hurdles. That even though the desire from everybody was, we really want to make massively large ships, like the mothership from Homeworld is like a 2-kilometer ship, and we wanted something of that scale. And we just had to be honest with ourselves about our technology, and our ability to pull that off just wasn't there. So that was like
playtime as well,
and playtime too. It would, from a gameplay perspective, that would have taken forever. We've had to find a way to break it up, and even then, it would have taken like hours and hours and hours. So it just wasn't going to work in a couple different vectors. And so that's where we were honest with ourselves and sort of pared down our ambitions on ship size is a good example. But there can be creative reasons why things don't work. The Game Jam game is a good example of that, and why we pivoted towards the blue collar theme. Because originally the Game Jam had this like cosmic horror, like dark, very grim storyline to it. Which, there's a couple of us on the team that we love horror games, we love horror movies. It was something that we really love, but as a studio, it didn't fit creatively with our grander ambitions of the type of games we wanted to put out. We wanted something a little more hopeful, something that had a little more
aspirational.
Thank you. Yeah. And so that's where we started to reassess the theme of the game from a creative perspective and focus more on the blue collar stuff. So there's many different reasons why you hit these, what we call inflection points in the project, where you really do need to rethink what direction you're heading.
It's funny to me that you say that you shifted away from this dark horror, grim storyline, yet you start your game under crippling, crushing debt, slaves to a corporate overlord. So, I don't know, a little bit, I feel like you kept that a little
some
bit.
of it.
You should have seen the Game Jam.
Yeah, if you think that's grim, you should, the original was far grimmer.
Fair enough. So these inflection points that you just mentioned, like, tell me a little bit about that. Like, I know you had mentioned before, like you had this one really big inflection point, and that shifted a lot of stuff. Can you elaborate a little bit
on how we move past that, or?
Yeah. So you were talking about, and I think this was even part of your talk too, where you hit this like kind of really big shifting point in the game.
Yeah. So like Chris said, this is something that we learned to do over the course of developing this project, and it's something that we've refined and we're going to start using more and more in our future projects. But at first, when we hit some of those inflection points, we did what we were used to doing as a studio, which was the high level creative team would sort of lock ourselves in a boardroom and brainstorm ideas and come up with what we thought was the new direction of the game, and we would take that out to the team and say, here's the new direction of the game. When we first did that, we found it just didn't go very well. That the team didn't respond super well to that process. That they didn't feel as invested in that new direction, and that they felt the new direction was missing some important elements of the game that they didn't want to lose. And so what we found was that the next time around, when we hit the next inflection point, we involved the entire team in discussing what wasn't working and what direction should we go, what directions can we go to try to resolve this. And what worked best there was actually identifying a couple different paths forward, several different breadcrumbs that could take us in a couple different directions, and then giving each of those their due course in sort of exploring them and talking about them and feeling them out. And from there, that's where we settled on things like shipbreaking as a mechanic in the game, and blue collar being a core theme of the game. I remember Chris, when we're talking just about blue collar, Chris did this mood board of artwork about what that means exactly. What era of blue collar are we talking about in history? What do the people in that kind of world look like? What does the work in that kind of world look like? And that just resonated with everybody. It was super clear, like everyone got jazzed about that idea in that moment, and it was really clear how the mechanics that we already had translated to that theme. So that just became like a no-brainer. Like that's definitely the direction we need to go in, and that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't brainstormed and collaborated with the entire team to find that nugget.
When I came into the project, the game was already kind of sinking into that. It was on like one of its many incarnations as like a kind of a quasi-vertical slice. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Elliot, you just started to get the blue collar aspirational going as like a theme, and it added like a layer to regular shipbreaking that kind of brought it up a stage, So like as soon as I saw it, there was like a spark to it. We kind of latched onto that. Elliot would do movie lunches where we'd watch a lot of like blue collar reference stuff, and that was all like super spot on. Like all the references. There was a little bit of this gritty kind of civil unrest. Was it a Japanese metropolis reference on top of a really weird one, Lee Majors in Steel, that 1979 movie. We were watching that.
That's like a weird blue collar action movie about construction workers building a high rise.
Interesting.
It's wild, but super super fun and really on point for this.
Super project. On tone. I wouldn't recommend the film, but we just laid on that, and that kind of like that kind of dark humor stuff and kind of like worker humor, that kind of offset some of that. Substitute some of that kind of gothic horror stuff that we were looking at earlier on in the game jam.
Nice. So were you guys developing, the entire time on Unity, or did you switch over to Unity for development, or how did that come about?
It was Unity from the very beginning. So the last project that we had done, Desert of Karak, was also a Unity game, so we were super familiar with the engine. We knew that it was flexible. We decided to use it for the Game Jam project because we knew we could iterate in it really quickly. And when we switched to the full size project, we didn't see any reason to switch out of it. And it's been pretty critical, the sort of openness and ability for anyone to get in there and start messing around with scripting and et cetera has been super critical for us, because it's a highly technical game, and having people, even like designers and artists, be able to get in and mess around with ideas has been really key to us.
Yeah, we've got a lot of experience, I think, on the team as well. Even in 2017 with Unity, like I think I picked it up in 2011, 2010, something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but I had a lot of Unity experience, so like it's one of the engines to go for, where most people have at least a passing knowledge of the engine. So
cool. And last time we had talked, I believe they had mentioned some of the new like entity component system stuff and how that unlocked some capabilities, and I know that was kind of tied into one of your inflection points and stuff like that, and some of the limitations. Can you elaborate a little bit on how that ultimately kind of helped?
Yeah, for sure. There's sort of 2 points where Unity features sort of came in and saved the day. The first was when we hit an inflection point where we knew we weren't going to be able to build enough ships by hand, and so we wanted to sort of switch to being more semi-procedural and have these ships kind of build themselves and provide gameplay variety that way. And the only way we were able to really manage that was when nested prefabs came out. Like we were right before that came out. I know that was like a long-term development at Unity, and everyone was like, "When are we going to get nested prefabs?"
That was the joke.
Yeah, exactly. and we were close to pulling the trigger on developing our own solution for it. And then it came out finally, and it was like, oh my god, this was saved the day in terms of content creation. So that was super key to totally for the procedural stuff. That was super key. And then just in general, in terms of the complexity of these fully dynamic ships and being able to cut every piece and all of the fuel and electricity flying through it and pressurization, all these systems that are running and making the game work and live and breathe, we hit a huge performance bottleneck that meant we would have had to have tiny ships, way smaller than you see in the game right now, if we wanted to have all that complexity, which we did. And so the only way we were able to pull that off was when ECS came out, and we switched over to the entity component system, and that lets us run everything in parallel and actually do all of those simulations at runtime. So that's also super key to the gameplay of the game.
Awesome.
And then Chris, do you want to talk about HDRP and how that was sort of key to us too?
Yeah, sure. So we had this game's a completely dynamic sandbox. Like all the ships are completely destructible. Mm-hmm. So one of the big challenges was lighting. You can't bake all your lights in a level that changes dynamically. So we had a lot of light bleed before we started to implement HDRP stuff. With HDRP, volumetric lighting and area lighting become a possibility, which allowed us to, kind of handcraft something without it.
I will throw out there real quick too, HDRP, high definition render pipeline, in case just anyone's like, what are you talking about? But yeah, anyway, sorry, keep going.
All good. That really picked us up in our look there is switching over to the high definition render pipeline, especially with lighting.
Yeah, you're right, because everything that is going to constantly be changing, stuff like that, you can't really pre-assume much. So
exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. You guys, so this game, I mean, I want to say it's launched, but it's not. It's kind of launched. In early access, do you say it's launched? Like, how do you refer to it?
Yeah. We say it's gone live.
Okay.
And then eventually we'll launch and be done. But even then, we'll probably continue to support it for a while. So it's definitely a weird thing and a weird time. And it's taken some learning on our part.
Fair enough. Well, now that the game is live, what surprised you? Like, what things did you think would be well received that weren't, or vice versa? Or, I mean, has anything really caught you by surprise that you weren't expecting?
Good question, Chris. Do you have anything
that surprised us? We did a lot of prep, at least, like in terms of like mental prep for like what it would be like doing early access. We watched some pretty interesting documentaries going into it, and we also spoke to a couple of people that have worked on early access games. We have a couple of people on the team that have already done early access games. So we knew what the pitfalls were of going that route. In terms of surprise, I don't think so. There was nothing in there that on paper we didn't already think about. But, when you're actually in there and it's happening, it's just like the intensity is something that you kind of acclimatize to. You're like, okay, all these things that we were worried about, yes, they do happen. And we knew they were going to happen, but still they've changed, our day schedule. They've changed the way we have to do things and the speed in which we turn things out. It's kind of like we've gone from like home cooks to like, line cooks, where you have to just get content out and then get the feedback and just move on from it straight away, Yeah.
So lots of mid-course corrections and
that's a good way to put it, Chris.
Now I have here in my notes. So the game is live. I'll say it again, but obviously still very much in development. And you had an update that just came out, right? The Haunted Frontier. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So that was an update that came out just in time for Halloween, and we took that opportunity to theme it in kind of a spooky sense. And so it's got this big narrative storyline about these ships that disappear on the edges of civilization, and then after a period of time seem to come back with no crew on them, but something's piloting them. So it's all very spooky ghost ship kind of stuff. But then Lynx, the salvage corporation that you work for, scoops them up on the cheap. They don't care that there's potentially something supernatural going
Space
on, and they just space ghosts or whatever. They just throw it in the salvage bay, and they get you working on it. And so that was cool. It was a really good opportunity for us to explore layering this sort of procedural, what we call the property system. So this, every ship in the game can randomly be a ghost ship. And when that happens, it's the same ship as usual, but it's what spawns inside of it is slightly different, and what you need to do to salvage it is slightly different. And that's been super rewarding. We see a lot of value in that kind of thing going forward. It was also our biggest narrative drop to date. We actually had a whole lot of narrative content that explained where the ships came from and how they've been taken over, and you find out what all of that is through the course of salvaging these ghost ships, which was really fun, really really cool. And we think that that was a really good sign of what we plan to do more in the future with our big updates, for players to really chew on in between updates.
Nice. It was a really fun delivery to make, actually. It's a good example as well of an early access, like kind of, I wouldn't say pivot, but like keeping our finger on the pulse of what people were receptive to. Narratively, there was a lot of stuff in there that we were kind of picking up on based on fan reactions and fan feedback. I don't want to give too much away on the drop.
I was going to ask, ectoplasm, do you send that to the forge or the barge?
Yeah. No, you keep it, you put it in your pockets, and you save it later for.
Fair enough. So is it you said it's kind of in line with Halloween. Is it like a limited event, or is it's not just part of the game?
It's now part of the game. Yeah, it's not a limited time event. It happened to be spooky because it was Halloween, and we wanted to be part of the whole all the games that are doing Halloween stuff. But it's a bunch of content that will live in the game forever, and it's a system that will live in the game forever. So it's not gonna go away anytime soon.
That was a really smart decision, by the way, because we knew we wanted to drop something for Halloween, and the obvious thing is to go, just a one-off where you put pumpkins in there, like screaming pumpkins and stuff. But what we actually did is leverage it, so this is like permanent content now. Permanent narrative as well.
I do like that I'm picking up on. We moved away from grim, spooky horror. By the way, our latest DLC or added or content, Haunted Frontier. I think you're still there. I think you're just kind of hiding it a little bit.
You just go wait till the Christmas and Easter updates, and then we'll balance it back out.
Yeah, exactly. Those will be hopeful and joyful.
Ships shaped like sleighs.
Yeah, full of presents.
Fair enough. This was Santa's ship. Yeah, fantastic. So, I mean, you've obviously released games before that before even early access was a thing, maybe, and now you're working on this game that is early access. How much different is it developing a game that's actively being played by people?
It's quite different, and it's been something that we've had to. I think Chris mentioned this. That we've had to acclimatize to it a little bit. We did our best to anticipate how the reception would go and what kind of feedback we would get, and how we would need to plan. Not just to incorporate that feedback, but even plan time to gather and look at and read all of that feedback, because there's a lot. And that that alone takes a significant amount of effort. So I think it's been hard for us to plan that stuff accordingly, and we've had to adjust how often we do updates and that kind of thing to make sure that we are giving ourselves that time to take in the feedback, incorporate it, test it, make sure it's actually what we're doing is actually addressing the feedback that we heard. So if you followed us from the beginning, you would see that we started with a lot of really rapid updates, and then started to slow down a bit more, and that was because of us trying to adjust more to take in feedback and stuff like that. So I think, like Chris said, the intensity of everything I think is higher than we anticipated.
We planned for it quite thoroughly, though, so I think potentially that could have been an absolute disaster, like the intensity, if we hadn't taken it seriously. We knew that we weren't going to get a minute the second this thing goes through the door, so it wasn't like we went live and we're like, launch party. We were working away to get the content thing going. Yeah, it's definitely changed the way we work behind, inside the studio. Yeah, a lot more intense, a lot more busy, and a lot more like kind of to a live schedule. Yeah.
Is it, normally you'd be working on a new piece of content or something, and you're just, kind of hoping it resonates or hoping it's the right, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to make this thing, we're going to ship it, and then hopefully it's well received. And it seems like now, obviously, you're getting feedback a lot faster as people are seeing it right away without these like longer, wait times and stuff like that. Is that nice? Is it nice to just know immediately whether it was successful or not, or was the breathing room you had before nicer?
It's a lot nicer being able to, especially as an artist, actually for all disciplines, being able to tie up everything, put a bow on it, and hide some of the sore points on stuff by just putting polish on it. That's better, but I'd say you probably become a better developer having that forced deadline. We found that even in pre-production and during production, that things seem to come together and you seem to let go of things that don't matter when there's an impending deadline, right? So in a way, this is kind of more structured and almost like more pure for like actually developing something and getting the core of something out and building upon it, right? There's no more fluff. So a lot scarier than it live. It's like performing in a play.
Sure.
But yeah, it's I guess it's kind of like apples and oranges, right? Like
a little bit. Yeah. I'd say it's definitely made us. It's a lot more uncomfortable. But I think, like Chris said, I think that's for the best. I think it helps us not worry so much about taking everything to perfection before it goes out. We can sort of get everything to a really good level, get it out there, and see how the reception is, and then iterate from there, as opposed to spending, who knows how long internally trying to foresee how this is going to play out. So that's I really enjoy the fact that we get that feedback so quickly and in that really tight loop. But it's definitely is different than what anyone on the team is used to.
I think that for me, the stressful thing about it is actually knowing that there's going to be feedback and just wanting to have enough time to do justice to that feedback that you're going to get, because you really want to make something that resonates with people, and sometimes our drops are like delayed between the initial feedback, and that for me, that's the stressful part. Is just thinking, are we going to have enough structure to be able to kind of like hit something back and kind of build upon this, like, and do it justice,
Right. So given that it's stressful and very different to what you're used to, why pick early access as a means of deployment?
I think because we were really interested in that feedback loop. We were really interested in getting this project out there, and then having the player base help us refine it to make it more successful. I think we saw more potential there for the game and the idea, especially because it is such an unusual game. Not just theme and setting, but the mechanics and the core loops and stuff are kind of strange and kind of. I mean, you played it. It's very open-ended. It's very simultaneously stressful, but also very calming. It's kind of got a weird vibe to it. And we weren't, as a studio, we weren't sure if we just sort of did our own thing on that and then put it out for full release. We weren't sure how it would do. Sure. So giving it a test run with these players and getting their input on how to refine it and make it a full thing was really important to us.
If there were players checking this game out on Steam, say, and we're kind of on the fence between, getting it early access and being part of it now versus waiting for the release, what would you say to them?
We are extremely committed to incorporating the feedback from the community. And we're going to continue to find more opportunities to leverage that. And so if you've ever bought an early access project and then seen the developer completely ignore the community and take the game in whatever direction and be dissatisfied with that. Our intent is to not do that. Obviously, it's hard to satisfy everybody, but
of course.
But it is super important to us to try to incorporate as much feedback as possible. So if you're on the fence in that regard, that makes sense. But I'd encourage you to try it because if you've got thoughts and opinions, we'd love to hear it. And also, if you've been burned by early access games that just weren't complete and didn't feel finished, it's important to us that everything goes out with a really good level of quality. It's not quite 100%, but it's not 50% quality. It's 80 to 90% before we're happy putting it out there. So we can guarantee that what you're going to get is going to be a decent quality.
That's pretty much it. It's being able to respond to feedback and make sure that nothing we put out is kind of scrappy. Every time we make there's been probably one or two drops that we've done where we've not been completely satisfied with the delivery of what we've given out, and that's been like heartbreaking. Like on our side, it's been like we've been super stressing out about it. So we're trying to keep that Blackbird level of quality going.
Yeah, I bet. And it's got to be tough, because everyone, has their feedback, and you got to pick which ones you do and which ones you don't. And some people are going to feel like, well, they're not listening or whatever. It's anytime you're interested in or interface with the community, that's got to be it. I know you guys didn't do my feedback of making space not dangerous at all. But that's just, I feel that would maybe conflict with the core of the game a little bit. But how do you obviously have your own design principles, your own goals, stuff like that. And then the community is telling you stuff. Like, how do you pick which ones you do, which ones you don't? You know what I mean? Or is there maybe a moment where there's been an overwhelming amount of feedback in a particular direction that you're still just like, no.
I think it's similar to the breadcrumb stuff that we were talking about earlier when we hit those inflection points, and you have to really get everyone's perspective. So previously, before we'd gone live, it was the team developing the game, it was the heads of the studio, and it was basically those people making sure that we were all on the same page and in agreement about which direction to go. And now the player base is also part of that conversation. And so what we'll do is we'll take all those conversations and then what we want as a team and then what the studio wants is at a high level. And when those things are in alignment, that's when we know we've got an idea we want to move forward with. So I think that's kind of, and again, that's something that we're learning how to do right now. But I think that's essentially the process that we'll use to help us determine what to do. And I think what's important is learning how to acknowledge feedback that we're getting, even if we do end up choosing to do something different. So what we want is what we don't want is people to feel like we're ignoring them. So yeah.
You just launched this Haunted Frontier. Well, what's coming up next?
So we've got an update coming towards the end of December, and it'll be another pretty decent size of content. It's actually one of the most exciting things I think we've done so far, which is a new ship type. So we've done lots of variations of our existing ships, which we had two of, and we can push those in a couple different directions to make some interesting variants. But what we really wanted to finally bite off was a brand new type of ship. Which we're calling the Javelin class, and it's like a radial class of ship, so it's much longer and skinnier and everything, a lot more external gameplay than the other roles, than the other types. So we're really excited for that. We think that's going to be just a really big sea change in gameplay type.
Yeah, the radial ships, they've we were used to doing kind of a almost like a maritime version of classic Blackbird designs. The ones that's coming up is going to be a lot more embracing modular. So in terms of like beats, silhouette, general feel, this is going to be a lot different, hopefully, to the player. We've done BBI with the first couple of ships, I think, and we're going to try BBI / kind of like NASA with these next ones.
Okay. Fair enough. Given that it's coming out late December, will any ships be candy cane shaped?
Maybe. That's a good question.
We'll have to show you the concept.
Candy class.
To be seen. Yeah, exactly.
Fair Fair enough. No, that sounds exciting. So, I mean, that's effectively gonna add another, third of options and stuff like that. Now you have the two ship types. You're adding the new one. And granted, that things are very modular, and these systems are very modular. Will parts interplay between them? Like, will some of the things you already have be seen on the Javelin class, and vice versa?
So everything we build is using a metric kit. So like everything has a super tight to the point of being initially restrictive metrics set on everything. So the way Shipbreaker works is all the parts we make can be used on any ship if we've done it correctly. Sometimes we haven't. But like every part that we put in can plug and play. Whether or not we use them is down to like whether or not they're working for what we want to do. So you might see some things exclusively for one archetype of ship for a while. But potentially we could do anything. We could do a big ship that has every single possible part on it, and call it the Frankenstein. That guy comes in. That's technically possible.
Wrapping up here, there's a few more questions just to ask, and these are actually ones that I'd asked before, and now that you're alive, I'd like to ask them again. Obviously, different individuals also part of the podcast this time. So what would you guys say that you're maybe most proud of with this game?
For me personally, it's two things. One is the blue collar theme and the setting, which we're not trying to like exploit the blue collar vibe. We're actually trying to like honor the blue collar class.
It works. It does.
Cool.
I can't stress that enough to people listening. Like, just check it out. It's I get chills.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because that was super important to us as a team. And so to see that go out and have people respond like yourself really positively to that, that's super rewarding. That makes us feel like we did the right thing. And then outside of that, just the really open-ended systemic gameplay. It's just been really rewarding to see different people's strategies and all the discussions about what's the best way to take apart X, Y, or Z ship, or approach the different hazards, different situations. That's been super rewarding to see as well. That also shows that those things are working.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. When I came in 2017, there was like a spark of what we wanted to do, and I am like super proud that we managed to keep that spark. The blue collar was there. We expanded upon it. We were very on it about not introducing any elements that was not Shipbreaker, which would have been easier. There was a couple of things we could have removed, a couple of things we could have put in, which would have made the road easier. We didn't do that. The fact that we managed to keep that in there is why the game is as unique as it is to play and to feel and to run through. So yeah, I'd say that's the thing I'm most proud of. In addition to the technically dense pipeline that we developed, we didn't want to do anything baked, canned, faked. Like, it's all fully dynamic game. The most difficult project that I've worked on, technically speaking, to make that happen, and we did it, and I'm super duper proud about that. Yeah.
Awesome. So what would you say your long-term plans are for Shipbreaker?
Long-term, we want to take this thing all the way to final, obviously. I think the biggest thing that means for us is actually introducing and fleshing out a full campaign. So keeping all the open-ended gameplay, but having you sort of progress through this storyline that you're uncovering as you're working on these ships. That's super important to us, and through doing that, expanding the roster of ships, expanding the roster of tools that you have available to you. Those are our biggest goals and ambitions for the remainder of early access.
Yeah, I think adding meaningful content to the game, not just skins and stuff like that. Meaningful content that adds to the systemic gameplay. For both me and Elliot, I think the pushing the narrative and immersion into the game to just give it a little bit more cinematic context.
Is there anything you want to say to players who this is the first time they're ever experiencing this or hearing about this?
Thank you for giving us a look. And we, like I said previously, if you jump in and you've got thoughts or opinions, you can hit us up on our Discord or on Twitter or Steam forums or wherever. We've got a presence sort of across all of those fronts. So please share with us your thoughts. Even if there's something that's holding you back from playing or purchasing the game. Let us know what that is as well.
Yeah, and in addition to thank you, keep uploading videos of the speed runs you guys do, because we do watch them. Every morning when we wake up, we see someone do something that we didn't think was possible with the game, and we spend a lot of time kind of going, so yeah, keep that up.
Don't you love that sort of emergent gameplay?
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'll throw another piece of advice in for people. Don't just open doors. Like, never ever just open doors. Like, depressurize every time.
That's why the game's hard, Mike.
That's right. I'm just like, well, here's a wall. I'm just going to cut into this. What's the worst that can happen? Oh, there's a core on the other side, or just whatever. I die a lot. I'm too impatient, because you're like, oh, it's just on the other side of this door. Yeah. So it's fun. It's part of the fun of it, right?
That's true.
And just that sheer panic as you get a hole in your suit, and you're like, oh no, back to half. It's fun. It's fun. And it's also neat trying to orient yourself in not just 3D space, like a traditional 3D game where up is up and down is down, but you rotate, and then what was left and right is now up and down. And that can be a lot of fun. It's very neat. But cool. So last question for you guys. Post launch, have you thought at all, or do you have anything you can talk about that, like, what's next? What's next for Blackbird Interactive?
There's not too much we can talk about. There's definitely several projects on the go. Unfortunately, we can't talk about many of them right now. We also have we've talked about earlier today, but the Homeworld 3 is in development, and you can follow progress on the Fig page for that. But yeah, other than that, unfortunately, there's not much more we can say, other than very cool things on the horizon.
Nice. Is one of them Hardspace ship builder? So you just receive a whole bunch of parts, and you're like, I gotta build this ship.
That is one of our most requested features, is a way to build ships.
Oh, so. Nice. Okay, yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Well, thanks again, guys. So this Hardspace Shipbreaker, talking with Blackbird Interactive, Chris and Elliot. Thank you so very much, guys, for being a part of this. It's great having you here.
It was fun talking to you. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, super fun. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Cheers. Thanks, everybody.